Hi, this is the first video in my new place, and this office I have is much bigger than the other one, and I don't have to shell out too much money. But I want to talk about the tanker war and how United States is confiscating through its allies Iranian oil or Iranian tankers and trying to sabotage Iran's foreign oil sales, and also the reciprocal actions that foreigners are taking that I think will be very damaging to U.S. economy. Well, United States is in a very good position, or was for a long time in a very good position, because it had a lot of manufacturing and ties to foreign countries, and could enforce its ideas, enforce its sanctions, stuff like that. But the world has changed so much, and many countries, they know about these sanctions and these philosophies, and they have developed very many ways of dealing with it. Well, I was watching YouTube, and I was watching Shoigo was doing something. It was in Russia. I didn't understand what was happening, but it was Venezuela, and I guess the Russians and the Chinese have decided that they're not going to let the Americans overthrow Venezuelan government, and they're doing economic deals with them, and they're doing making refineries and all that. And this has happened with other countries too. For example, it happened with Syria, and Syria did not want to become part of the Western influence, and they got away with it, and they made their choices. And well, I think that because of all the problems that the U.S. government gives foreign countries and foreign companies and sanctions them and endlessly harasses them, is that the United States itself is going to go into a deep economic recession, and also it will become very isolated economically or politically. Well, if you had a lot of problems with the U.S. government or U.S. companies, and you decided that you don't want to do any more business with them because it's just too much problems, and the world is full of companies that do all kinds of stuff. The oil exploration, transport oil, um, uh, build rockets, do manufacturing, and many countries have already become very industrialized, and you might even get better price on anything that you want to buy, starting from weapons to cars to rockets that go to the moon. Um, so this is one reason I think that the, the economic and political isolation of the United States and countries like Israel that harass other countries is going to continue, and it's going to become even more extensive. Well, I'm hoping that this economic warfare will not end in military confrontations, but I think that in the coming months or years, that many countries will engage in confiscation of U.S. assets in foreign countries, like confiscating their tankers, their ships, their smaller military ships, confiscate their accounts. I saw a piece that some Americans were complaining on the CNN that Russian embassy or Russian personnel, they were following them. I guess they they were said they were a charitable organization, but the Russians were accusing them of bribing local people, and uh, well, the extent of the cooperation between local governments like Venezuela, Syria, Iran, with Russians and Chinese, I think it's very extensive, and this extends to internet spying and even following Americans. Well, actually, uh, there is a psychic. His name was Edgar Casey, and he was saying that there was a prophecy that there will come a point when the safety of many Americans will be in doubt. Is because the U.S. government has been so insulated from retaliation that they have been continuing these practices of sanctioning and harassing many foreign governments, that the Americans themselves, the private parties, they will come under a lot of diplomatic or personal or financial harassment or attack, and this is actually the prophecy of Edgar Casey, and I think that by seizing foreign government or sovereign foreign government's property, then the United States opening itself up to the world plundering it, and well, the U.S. has a lot more assets outside of its borders than the Iranians have here or Mexicans have in Israel. Another thing that I think we'll start seeing is that the countries like Israel that use political influence or bribery to harass other countries, they might come under naval blockade because they're a small country, and they want to stop harassing other countries, and well, for example, Iran could block food shipments to Israel. We have so many ships, we have thousands of speedboats. They could stop them from eating. That's not a very hard thing to do. Or shoot down their transport planes. They'll go hungry. They are not. They are human. They have needs, and this warfare can become much wider. Even though nobody got killed, well, a lot of business is going to get ruined. Well, when Americans at the time of John F. Kennedy were in Cuba, and they were attacking them, JFK was very worried that many foreign governments will lose faith in the United States, and that he could not negotiate diplomatically settlements, or if there were problems or warfare, so they wouldn't believe our agreements, because the U.S. violated the agreements or didn't respect the sovereignty of Cuba, and he was worried that this will extend to other countries. But look at today, and the attitude that many foreigners hold against U.S. government, of no faith whatsoever. But then also this has an economic equivalence with the bonds that the U.S. publishes and supports itself, because their manufacturing and a lot of businesses have died. Well, a lot of those bonds were purchased by Arabs or by Asians, and what's going to happen to those bonds when when foreigners lose faith in U.S. currency. This has been going on, and it will come to a more dramatic crisis shortly. But it just there is an economic equivalence, and the Americans or Israelis or British, they could go bankrupt, they could go hungry, they could have their ships confiscated, their citizens arrested. This the, what's good for the goose is also good for the gander, and they're not insulated from the consequences of their actions. I think there was some reaction inside the British government and some worries that if they had initially confiscated the tanker, that it will ricochet back to them, and they came around and resorted to diplomatic moves to resolve it. But now the U.S. government is saying that hey, we're going to reconfiscate Iranian tanker. Well, this this can this can become reciprocal. I think that some of these confiscations might extend to U.S. assets. U.S. has a lot of assets, land, um, has money in the banks. They continue going around and badgering foreigners. This can backfire. Well, I think these are preludes to complete collapse of U.S. empire. But I think that also the personnel, like U.S. citizens in bases or ships or companies operating, there is a lot of U.S. companies operating in many Arab countries. Uh, they could become under fire, and also many foreign countries, they don't respect U.S. Intellectual property right, and that's a very large scale theft right there, or confiscation. But this can extend to other areas. But this is very sad because it makes doing business internationally for many companies very difficult, and many companies have to re-engineer their foreign relations. Well, Trump is unilaterally imposing tariffs on China. I think I heard many Chinese companies are rerouting their products, or they doing manufacturing in other countries, or well, Vietnamese or Malaysians are coming in and replacing Chinese goods. This whole business is so stupid, and it could only be initiated by stupid Americans. It's very damaging. It's damaging to many countries, including the United States. But they have become so fat and insulated in their businesses and their government that they are not really seeing the blowbacks, because the scale of business they have here. But this can change. American companies are companies. They need to do business and sell and buy and ship stuff, and all these warfare and belligerent moves on the U.S. government's part, it damages those businesses. I think many retail companies are going to lose money because there is stupid tariffs, and also there is no faith or security of knowing what might happen tomorrow, or if some idiot in the White House doesn't come up with a 40 or 50 or 100% tariff. You don't know that within a week it went from 10% to 20%. So all of this is going to end up in loss of faith in U.S. government and also loss of valuation for U.S. currency itself. And I don't know where all this will lead. Well, I was listening to Celente. He thinks that there's going to be a collapse in bond market. Well, a lot of analysts think like that. And currency devaluation, like U.S. dollar suddenly within very short time collapsed to half its value. Well, thank you very much for being in my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and leave comment. Don't be shy. Thank you.